Kevin Eastman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First, I want to thank all you folks for coming. My wife and I have absolutely an incredible, great time. Blast meeting you all here at Indianapolis Indie Pop. It's been a lot of fun. It's like coming out on our 30th anniversary year. We tried to go places that we hadn't been before because we miss getting out to different parts of the country and meeting the real fans, the hardcore fans. So it's an honor to be here. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I do. First of all, Kevin. His wife, Courtney, is back there running the multimedia. Courtney, can you wave at everybody? Absolute proof.
She's working on her queen waves.
Absolute proof that geek guys can get the beautiful girl.
It's the hair. It's the hair.
And wait, but look at this. Look at him, look at her. Isn't it Leonard and Penny?
Absolutely.
Isn't that awesome? All right, Kevin, so I do have one question to get us started. 30 years ago, this month, you guys created these silly turtles. Did you have any idea at the time that it was going to blow up and become what it has?
Not even in our wildest dreams, not even in our wildest dreams. I mean, Peter and I grew up as, and I'll tell you the story in a minute, but Peter and I grew up as huge comic book fans. All we wanted to do, to our parents' chagrin, was to draw comic books for a living. I think they honestly thought they'd never get us out of the basement. So when we created the Turtles, we were absolutely positive nobody would buy one single issue of the comic book. And to be here 30 years later, still talking about Turtles, talking about the new cartoon show, the movie, the IDW series, it's beyond a dream come true, and it's all your fault. I love you guys. You gave me the greatest job ever, so I appreciate it. I'm going to walk you through a couple I put together a slideshow for the 30th anniversary that gives you a little bit of history of the Turtles, answer some questions, and we'll play you some clips, talk about Ice Cream Kitty, which I know you're all dying to hear more about, and a bit of the movie. This first slide, I always like to say that when I was a kid growing up, Jack Kirby was one of my heroes, and it was also Peter Laird's one of Peter Laird's heroes. When I first met him, we tried to sell some of our artwork to this magazine in Northampton, Massachusetts. And I went over to his house and I saw that Jack Kirby drawing, and I had never seen a Jack Kirby original before, and my jaw hit the floor, because to me it was like, that's the reason I started drawing comics. And I always like to say guys like Jack Kirby and Wally Wood and John Severin, guys that I admired, I like to say that I stand on the shoulders of giants because those are the guys that inspired me to draw. I want to be a cartoonist, and Peter as well, so I like to show that piece. This is the infamous house in Dover, New Hampshire, and Peter and his wife had moved into it. We had started doing, they invited me to move in with them. We started Mirage Studios, which was a mirage because this was actually our studio, it was a living room. And late one night in 1983, we were trying to do samples to sell our work. And so I told Peter, I said, this is the next big thing. And I drew this drawing here, which is Michelangelo, which is the first turtle ever drawn. And I said, ha ha ha, this is going to be the next big thing. We both laughed. Pete did a drawing to sort of one-up my drawing, and so this is his version. And then I penciled this one, and Peter inked it, and we just were laughing to kill ourselves because we're like, this really is the dumbest thing we've ever seen. So, as I like to say, the next day we get up, because we had no distracting painting work going on, we said, why don't we come up with a comic book that tells how these characters got to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We started that in 1983, and 1984 was published. But one of the things that comes up a lot when you're developing the stories, they said, where did you come up with the origin? A lot of it's based on characters like Daredevil and New Mutants and X-Men and things that we were inspired by kids. They asked, as kids, a lot of asked where the names came from. We always thought that, you know, traditional Asian names for the Turtles would be respectful but not funny enough. American names wouldn't be funny enough. So when I was a kid, this is a painting I did in high school, my homage to Leonardo da Vinci. I loved art history, always loved art history, loved art, and I did this painting when I graduated. And so I said, how about Renaissance painters? And so Leonardo was first, Michelangelo was second, his name's Raphael was third, and then Donatello was almost named Bernini, because I like Bernini as a sculptor better. Pete twisted my arm and said, how about Donatello? So that's where Donatello came from. When we put out the first issue, we did some innovative things. So there was a self-publishing market. We put out a press release. This is an example of the original press release. is an ad that we put out. We sent it around to all the local newspapers. And I think, you know, this stuff went into newspaper offices and they picked it up and said, what is this? And so we ended up getting a lot of interviews, and it was picked up by the AP service, and it went all over the place. This is an actual movie. This is an actual convention poster from the first show that we did in Dover, New Hampshire, May 5th, 1984. That's where the first issue came out, and we went back there this year to celebrate 30 years later with Ralph, the guy that started the convention. So it's funny to be, you know, there 30 years later. Look how we look. You can tell which one's me. I was still trying to grow a mustache, still am. We did this little chart as we finished off each page of the comic book. We each marked off each page, and so there's me and Pete finishing the actual first issue, and there's the cover of the first issue. So, what a treat. A lot of people ask about, because there was only 3,000 copies printed of the first issue. I had a $500 income tax return, cleaned out all $200 of Pete's bank account, and I would borrow $1,000 from an uncle, and we published 3,000 copies. And those first printings are going for like crazy money now. We never thought we'd sell a single copy, so it's amazing to us that they're even collectible. But a lot of people ask how you tell the difference between the different printings, and that ad for Gobbledygook was that's printed on the inside back cover of the first issue, and we changed it for the second one, so that's the real key. I always joke about, these are the actual stacks of the boxes of the first issue when it was printed. We had them stacked around the living room. Because we never thought we'd sell any, we made furniture out of some. We made a coffee table, made some end tables, and stacked the rest in the corner. And then I think the next one's the comic book. This is the Portsmouth Comic Con that we first premiered the issue, 1984. And it's too funny. I look back at that. It was really funny because Pete and I got to hang out. We did a 30th anniversary signing in New Hampshire. It was just an absolute blast. After we finished the first issue, I went back to cooking lobsters. I worked as a lobster cook in Maine. And we started getting calls from distributors and comic book stores, like, are you guys going to do a second issue? And we were like, we never thought we'd sell the first one. So, okay, well, let's come up with a second one. And Pete had moved to Connecticut, so this is the studio in Connecticut. There's one of our office spaces. We actually had a real office. It was actually a porch. I always love to show what my studio looked like at that time, because, you know, it sort of gives you more of a feeling of, you know, that's where all the creation happened. There's me working on the, still trying to grow the mustache, by the way. There's us working on the second issue. When the second issue came out in January of 1985, it was a point where Pete and I say that that's where the dream really came true, because all our life, all we wanted to do was draw comic books for a living. And based on the sales of the second issue, we figured that if we did 60 days a year, we'd make about $2,000 each before taxes. We could eat all the macaroni and cheese we want. We could draw comic books for a living. And that was it. The dream came true. We were now officially comic book artists, drawing comic books for a living, and just could not have imagined it could have gotten any better from there. And then it did, and it's just even crazier. This is one of the first big conventions we did. We did this down in Atlanta, and it was the first time we sat along, you know, our heroes that we started meeting, and I think they would sort of look at Peter and I and going, what are you guys doing here? And we were sitting there like, I can't believe we're here. You know, sitting next to some of our heroes, and this was actually a page from Turtles issue 3, the introduction of April O'Neil. Actually, April O'Neil was introduced in 2, but this is where they really bonded with the Turtles in this. I like to show, this is, gives you an idea what some of the pages looked like. We worked back in those days. This was Peter and I at San Diego Comic-Con, which was, remember the first year we went to Comic-Con, they were hoping for 10,000 guests. When you go to Comic-Con these days, it's about 150 to 200,000 guests, and it's just crazy. But this is us. We used to do $5 sketches, would sketch for 3 days, and then would run around the last part of the convention buying as many comic books and geeky stuff that we could carry home in our luggage. And I still go to the comic stores pretty much every month. Here's another shot of us at the Comic-Con. This is one of my favorite pictures because I mentioned Jack Kirby a couple times as being such a huge inspiration to us. And we actually got to meet Jack one year, and he is just role model not only for fandom, because he was one of those guys that created most of the Marvel Universe, most of the stuff that Stan Lee takes credit for, but Jack was working right side by side with Stan. And he just loved his fans, and he loved art, and he loved comics, and we got to meet him, and that was probably one of those days where I could not think of one thing to say to him. It was like, Mr. Kirby, you're so awesome, which he's heard every time, but he's just a fantastic guy. So, it was awesome. This is one of my favorite, around this time in comics, they were doing 4-issue micro-series. And so we had to continue to parody the elements, so we did this one-issue micro-series, and I wanted to introduce a character called Casey Jones. It's one of my heroes. Was the second human character introduced in the Turtle universe. It was great because I came up with the sweatpants, the hockey mask, the baseball bats, and Pete threw in at the end, he said, what if we give him a golf bag? They could put all kinds of different weapons in, and that pretty much made Casey complete. And because Raphael's one of my favorite characters to write, and he's crazy, he's also a Wolverine character, I actually wanted to have Raphael meet somebody that was crazier than him, that actually might put him a little bit in check. And at that time, there was also, the big theme in comics was vigilantes that had this really horrific backstory. You know, their whole family was killed, their city was killed, and so they became a vigilante. And I just wanted to create a bad guy vigilante, a vigilante from watching too much bad TV. So that's where Casey came from. He used to watch 3 TVs at once and, and put on his hockey mask. By the time we get to Turtles issue 5, this is the first color cover that I did for Turtles 5, and it was our, you know, after we got to issue 4, both Peter and I were huge fans of Star Wars, so we wanted to do the next series of issues getting more into the backstory of the Turtles, and so also pay respects and homage to George Lucas. And so we did this whole series, and this is my recreation of the cantina scene with this big laser fight. And this is one of the first times I painted all of the Turtles with red bandanas, which was the staple of the original series, which we changed later into the comic series. Again, these are sort of the Turtles comics you see in black and white. They're actually printed in this, when actually we draw them, they come up more of a sepia tone, so I always thought it was fun to show some of my favorite spreads and what the original pages look like, which we've got some on the table if you want to come out and take a look. One of my next favorite issues that we ever did was the Cerebus Turtle crossover, Turtles number 8, and because when we were sort of trying to break into the business, one of our heroes was this guy Dave Sim, who created Cerebus, who went on to do 300 issues, big advocate for self-publishing, and it was sort of his idea that, you know, when he first drew Cerebus, it was just this funky little, you know, aardvark dressed like Conan the Barbarian, drawn like Barry Smith used to draw Conan, running around hacking people up and having these crazy adventures, and I was like, hey, we could do that. And so this is a recent thing I did with Dave Sim for one of his Kickstarter campaigns where he introduced Matisse, the 5th turtle, the unknown ninja. So I love Dave, and he was a big inspiration for me, and it was great to meet him and work with him, and it's one of my favorite all-time issues, the Turtles. I think we had a sea turtle or two in the history of the Turtles. This was kind of funny when we started doing, as Turtles started getting more popular, we were selling more comic books, we were getting interest from people that do licensing, and this guy that used to work for the Muppets made this stuffed turtle for us, and that sat in our chair in our studio. It's cool at the same time as it is creepy, but we love it, and actually it was one of the things that when we met the toy company, we showed them this piece, and they actually, I think for the first time, said, well, I think we could make toys out of this. We do this. So, in 1986, 87, we got an interest from different companies to do toys and do cartoons and that stuff. And that picture was Pete and I looking at the first prototypes of the Turtle toys. And again, much like we never thought we'd sell one single copy of issue 1, even working on the toy line, working on the animated shows, we didn't think, who's going to buy this? Who's going to buy this? And actually, this was when they actually premiered the toys. And let me see, that was 1988. They premiered the toys at Toy Fair in New York in February. They released the Turtle toys in June of 1988. I remember where we lived in New England, the big toy store was KB Toys. And so when we heard that they were on the shelves, Peter and I drove down to Springfield, down to KB Toys, and we're walking, you know, to the toy store, to the action figure aisle, and as we're getting close, this mother's pulling her young son out of the action figure aisle saying, no, I'm not buying you one of those stupid Ninja Turtles. And we just were like, oh my God, what have we done? And that's where it started. So this is, as the studio grew, we started doing more issues. The Turtles comic books, we were doing all the licensing art, we were designing a lot of the toys, working on the animated shows, designing work on the Turtles board games, coloring books, things like that. We hired a bunch of different artists, a lot of our friends that we met over the years at comic book conventions. And this is an early shot of what the Mirage Studios looked like in probably about 1989. And the coolest part about creating your own character and owning your own character and controlling all the rights, much like a lot of guys like Jack Kirby didn't have that option, we pretty much got to say what happened to the Turtles and what didn't happen to the Turtles. We worked on 300 animated shows, all the live action movies. We approved pretty much anything you saw with a turtle on it. We either created it, drew it, worked on it, approved it. And it was pretty crazy because we went from, You know, 1987, we were drawing 90% of the time. We were doing licensing business about 10% of the time. 1 year later, it was the complete opposite. We were now running the Turtles Empire, which is, you know, 90% of the time was business, and, you know, working on the shows and all that stuff, and the rest was drawing. So this was, a lot of people don't know that Peter and I only did 15 issues together. The first 15 issues of the Turtles, 1 through 11, and this is the final page of issue 11. We did the 1-issue micro-series up to issue 11, but we oversaw and did individual stories with individual artists, you know, pretty much for the next 15, 20 years. And this is, so the comics were always the root, and it was always the heart, and it was always this thing that we kept personal to us and wanted to spend the most time on. But we then just started doing stuff like this, which is, when we started working on the first Turtle movie, the cartoon show was a success, the toys were selling well, the studio was growing, and they said, well, we want to do a movie. And we just sort of like, how are you going to bring, it's one thing you can draw these characters as comic books, which we never thought would sell. It's the fact that you do an animated series that we never thought anybody would watch. They want to do a movie, and it's like, how are we going to make this movie work? And what made it work was Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Steve Barron was the director of the first movie. He co-wrote the movie with Todd Langdon. Pete and I worked on the movie, and then Steve was good friends with Jim Henson, so these are some of the early development shots of the development of the Turtles as the movie. And this, they actually had created, to make the Turtles work as the puppets, these first full body suit puppets, they created technology that was done almost specifically traded for that, for the Turtles. And I still remember, this was on set of movie 1, got to meet Jim Henson, and I remember going through you know, Peter and I, when we first went down to the studio, you know, you go into a studio back lot, and the back of it looks like this big staging area where this, you know, just looks like a mess, and you go around the corner, and suddenly there's New York City in all its glory, all lit, actors running around, lighting guys. We walk further around the corner, and there's all these turtles, all 4 turtles. One of them, Michelangelo's wearing a sombrero, and they're doing stretches and they're doing stuff, and it was one of those moments where, like, oh my God, they were real. They actually were, they came to life. And of course, I mentioned Casey, one of my favorite human characters. This was meeting Elias Koteas on set. He was so worried that he said, I don't know if I'm doing a good job with the character. And I'm like, dude, you are Casey. And if you've seen the first movie, he was the perfect Casey Jones. Second time around shop, it's great seeing, you know, Steve Barron, when he directed the film, designed the film, he pulled scenes right from the original comic books, like the second time around shop from Turtles issue 10, and all that stuff coming to life on the movie set was, you know, beyond cool. One of the actors, this is one of the actors that they cast. I was reading one of the Turtle comics on set, so I had to jump in and photobomb. So, still working on the mustache. This is fun. That was a great memory. It's still one of my favorite versions of the Turtles. And there's been many versions of the Turtles, but the first movie is, I think, the best. So, one of the coolest parts about drawing for a living is also learning how to paint. And so, what I was so lucky that I was able to do, you know, create my craft, my dream, my drawings, work on paintings, and these are a couple of my favorite paintings from the early series of the Turtles. Miss those days sometimes, but still drawing a lot of the Turtles is another one of my favorites. So, this was as we started, you know, Peter and I doing less work together. On the regular series, we get to work with other artists, and I did this book with Mark Bodie, who was also grew up as a huge Bruce Lee fan, because that was one of the inspirations. I was a big Bruce Lee fan. And when creating the Turtle, they said, what's the dumbest animal that would be Bruce Lee as an animal? And that's where the Turtles came from. So we did this Shell of the Dragon story. It was a real hoot, because we did the traditional Bruce Lee style story with the awesome Mark Bodie. It was one of my favorite stories too. Today I'm doing a lot of stuff for IDW. I don't know if you guys have seen the IDW comic series, which has absolutely been a blast to work on. And I always like to show a little bit of the process. It's so, you know, I do consulting on the story, I do layouts for a lot of stuff, and really enjoy doing it. So it reminded me, when I started working on IDW 3 years ago, it reminded me how much I miss drawing the Turtles, how much I love drawing the Turtles, and how much I love telling stories. And so when I do all the coverage you see, I do this blue line pencil rough, which then is approved for inking. Then you see the piece inked, and it's colored by the wonderful Rhonda Patterson, who's also here at the show. You should go by her booth. She's amazing. Issue 28 was Tom and I and Bobby designed the series based on the City at War series that Pete and I originally wrote. It's called City Fall, and this was issue 28, and I can't resist doing a wraparound cover where I get to put every single character that we've been able to bring back to the miniseries, Bebop, Rocksteady, April Cry, Shredder, and just full-on mayhem. So this is, he's coming back, I think. Oh, that's Slash. Working with Nickelodeon on the new series has been great. Stuart Neely is the guy that was fully responsible for bringing back the coolness and the look of the whole new series. He grew up in Philadelphia. His dad owned a pizza parlor. He dragged his mom to all the Turtle movies. And I'd been friends with Ciro before the show, and when Ciro got to, there's Ciro on the left. When Ciro got the gig of doing the Turtles, he brought me in. He said, Obi-Wan, what do we do? And he had already come up with a great idea, so we got to work with Ciro, and I think it's one of the best versions of the Turtles, because much like what we're doing with the IDW series, you get to pick from all the Turtle universes and roll them into one new universe, and then make it a new foundation. But he started it, the very first episode has him going up above ground for the first time, having pieces for the first time, and I think it's very funny, very well written. And this is Casey Jones brought back. Actually, Ciro actually put Eastman on the stick and Laird on the pads. That was his little homage to Casey. It's great. Should we talk about it? You want to play the clip? You pull the clip. Actually, I'll tell you about the Ice Cream Kitty in a second. As we switch around.
On the next brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, April's Kitty plus Ice Cream plus Goons equals Ice Cream Kitty. New Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, April's Kitty plus Ice Cream plus
Should we switch around so
Ninja Turtle Green Kitty. Sunday at 11 on Nick.
Oh, Green Kitty. You want to do it again? I'm going to play it again.
On the next brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, April's Kitty plus Ice Cream plus Goons equals Ice Cream Kitty. Aw, Kitty. Don't miss a brand new episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on a brand new day next Sunday at 11 on Nick.
Ice Cream Kitty came from, go to the animation studio, meet with the artists, and do all the, see all the cool stuff they do and talk about stories. And Ciro was like, I want you to do a voice for the show. And I said, if I do a voice for the show, I want it to be like what George Clooney did on South Park, where he was the dog. I said, I want it to be really goofy, really silly. And so when we, last year he was doing this, the preview of upcoming stuff this year at San Diego Comic-Con, and they showed a picture of Ice Cream Kitty. I said, that's it. That's what I want to be. I want to be Ick. I want to be Ice Cream Kitty. And the character is sort of loosely based on Clunk, the one that Peter and I did in the Michelangelo Christmas special. But it was perfect, and I just had an absolute blast doing it. And that's about it. That's all the stuff I did. And I think Courtney was in the photo booth laughing her butt off the whole time. I'm pretending I'm a cat and actually doing the clawing things as I'm sitting there with the mic and everything. So it's too funny. But I have to create a shirt now that says, I am Ice Cream Kitty, and I have to wear it around. We'll make one for Courtney that says, I'm with Ice Cream Kitty. So, soon available at Target and Walmart. So, I'm working on a new annual right now. It's actually a little bit late. I'm doing a lot of stuff, a lot of traveling for the Turtles 30th anniversary. But I'm bringing one of my favorite parts is in the Turtles issue 8, the Cerebus issue, I created this character called Renette, who's this kind of bumbling magician's apprentice, and we get to bring her back. In this series for all new story. It's going to be 48 pages and it should be out in July, I hope, but it's, the lead Renette looks a little familiar these days. For the 30th anniversary, we get to do a couple of cool things. I get to work with Simon Bisley again. I hadn't worked with him since 1996. This is a variant cover for the 30th anniversary special with the things available to show. And I think the next one should be the Peter Laird one we did. Yeah. Peter and I hadn't drawn together in over 15, 20 years. We just hadn't, and I got to pencil this piece that Pete inked, and I think again reminded us both how much we like working together and how much we enjoy. A lot of people ask if there's friction between us or anything weird, and it's not. Pete's a great guy, and Turtles wouldn't be here without him and us working together in that little studio in 1983. This is another piece that Peter and I did together. One of the guys at IDW, one of the editors, says, I love that iconic Turtles on the rooftop shot. But I always wondered what happened 10 seconds later, so we did this piece, which is them jumping off the roof at Shredder, so that's cool. I also own Heavy Metal Magazine. I've owned it since 1990. It's been, Heavy Metal Magazine was one of those magazines that I found when I was 1977. I'd been getting a little bored with regular comic books, and along comes heavy metal, and it showed me, that there's things beyond superheroes. You could write and draw and tell any kind of story with comic books, and that inspired me to, keep working comics, keep working stories, and it led me to discovering self-publishers like Richard Corbin and Vaughn Bodie and Robert Crumb, and that's the first cover that I ever done. I owned heavy metal, I think, for 23, 24 years, and that's the first cover I ever did, and it's her fault. She inspired me to create a character called Artemis, so you might see more of her in the future. Daredevil, a lot of people ask, when they talk about the Turtles' origins. I was a huge fan of Daredevil. From day one, that was my favorite superhero, and so you notice a lot of the Turtle origin comes from Daredevil. The truck driving down the street, blind man walks in front of it, young Matt Murdock runs out to save the blind man, the canister comes loose, hits him near the eyes, but they never said what happened to the canister after that. So Pete and I had the canister continue bouncing down the street, and that's where the Turtles came from. So, but this is my dream project, is to do a Turtles Daredevil crossover, so maybe one day. My lovely wife, us goofing around. We love coming out here to the shows. We booked about 25 shows this year, like this one here in Indianapolis, and we have the most fun, and the fans give us such great energy and inspiration, and we love it. And here's me in my studio with no mustache. I think let's show the movie trailer, and then we'll take some questions. So, thanks. Awesome. What's that? Do you guys want to see the movie trailer? You've probably seen it online. Okay. You want to see it again anyway? Or? All right, what the hell?
This is the new movie?
It's the new movie. Cool. This is the first one that they put out there, and then we'll look forward to taking some questions.
And I love it, by the way. So.
No, thank you. Actually, the IDW series is fantastic. I love what Tom Waltz designed as a new foundation to tell stories on, and it was a huge thing to work with Peter again. And we've talked about doing other things, and I think it's like, with Peter and I, anytime we've talked about an idea, it's almost like having it develop naturally and see how it evolves. And we've thrown a few ideas back and forth, so if one clicks, hopefully you get to see us work again next year. But I absolutely adore the new IDW series. It's fantastic. So, but great question. Thanks for your support.
Y'all step right on up. Don't be shy. First off, kind of a side thing. First, were you going for the John Hall look in those old pictures, the Hall & Oates kind of mustache hair?
Well, I had the pants, and I had the mullet going on for a while there, and I was like, I kept the hair as long as it. Then I started getting too Michael Jackson straggly, so I had to shave it.
Okay, for my real question though, for years in Ninja Turtles, it was always the origin of them being an accident, and they even mentioned that big time in the second movie.
Yeah.
But with newer things, particularly the IDW comic, which I absolutely love,
Thanks.
And I know you're a consultant of, and seemingly so far the new movie, it's more that they were man-made purposefully.
Right.
So what kind of brought that about, and what are your feelings on that?
Well, it's a good question, and what's interesting is that, because even if you look at the origin that Pete and I originally wrote in the Black and White series, was a very specific setup, but when we were working on the first animated series, we changed it. We changed the origin specifically. There was a lot of things we softened up. We wrote it for a different audience, and I think after, when it came time to working on the IDW series, it was, well, everybody's sort of seen that again and again and again, and we figured, well, how can we, because now we're looking back at, 25 years of Turtle stories, how can we make it a little bit more interesting without, straying too far off the reservation? So with the IDW series, of having them more manufactured and, even doing really dangerous things, and we were very worried about it when we had April name the Turtles, not Splinter, and, but it sort of set up a foundation that we were seriously worried that the fans wouldn't embrace, and it's, the love and support we've gotten for the new IDW series is just fantastic. But with the animated series, it's much more like the original Turtle story. It was more of an accident. And then with the new movie, it's kind of a combination of both. I can't give too much away, but it's sort of like you can sort of set up the manufacturing process, but there's still a series of accidents that helps the Turtles arrive at the thing. But it's, I've seen the story, I've seen the script, and I know what they're doing. We've only seen 60 seconds, but and I hope the fans embrace it. I think it's solid. It's a good movie. It's going to be there, and I think it'll all click once you see how it all falls together. I'm trying not to say too much, but also trying to make sure you guys are comfortable with it. So good. Hi.
Hi. My question is, well, first of all, everyone knows the personalities of the Ninja Turtles. You have the leader, the badass Spyro, Raphael, and the nerd, Donatello, and the derpy little brother, Michelangelo.
Yeah.
But my question is, where'd you get the personalities for the Turtles, and how'd you know to find the right voice actors for them?
Boy, that was much like the first Turtle cartoon theme song was just like you never know until it's right till you hear it. And when we were working on the voices, it was the same thing. We sort of searched around a while. It was sort of like you almost had to close your eyes and listen to it because the characters were so well developed in our heads, but they were based on friends and family. Donatello, Pete Laird is pretty much Donatello. I think I'm Raphael some of those days, and so he's always a character that I gravitated to. A friend of mine that I went to high school with, Steve Levine, was the class clown, the comedian, so I based a lot of Michelangelo on Steve. And Leonardo was a character, so he fit every role model of Captain Kirk or Captain America, or so that role model leader. And as we developed their personalities, it was like feeling around until they were more well established. But yeah, the voices were hard. Even like doing the voices for the new movie was hard to pick the right ones because again, you can't stray too far off, or we lose the fan base, and we want it to be there. But it's not easy. Good question. Thank you.
I'm actually a comic book writer, and I want to make my own series that I hope that could one day become like an animated series, like the Turtles. Maybe even become like the next Turtles themselves, the next big thing.
Sure.
And I was wondering, how did you get discovered by the toy companies and cartoon Wolfman? What was it? Wolf's Productions?
Murakami Wolf, yeah.
Murakami Wolf Productions. How did you get discovered by that?
It was a series of happy accidents when we created the Turtles, and the comic book started selling. When the sales got to be a couple 100,000 an issue, we did some licensing, some role-playing games, and that had huge success. And the more things evolved, we started had people contacting us. We never went out and shopped the Turtles. We had more people coming to us and asking if they can make toys and that stuff. And so with Murakami Wolf, once we partnered with the animation studio to do the toys, they wanted to produce an animated show. So we actually visited several animation studios till we chose them and then developed the story. So it was, to us, the whole Turtle story is literally a series of very happy accidents, things that should have never lined up when they lined up to be standing here 30 years later. So it's like we were never directing, and it seems like it was directing us.
You broke all the rules.
we broke all the rules. We have more luck than I imagine someday. It's pretty fantastic.
Okay, I know when you meet people here, everybody knows who you are and we're excited to meet you, but what kind of reactions do you get out in the real world? Like if you meet a 30-year-old man that has a 6-year-old son, and you're like, oh, I'm Kevin Eastman, and what do you do? Oh, I created the Ninja Turtles. You're a jerk, I hate you because my kid goes on and on, or do they think you're great or what?
Fortunately, the Turtles are a celebrity, so I don't get recognized that much. We used it recently leaving Canada, going through customs. Yeah, so what was the purpose of your visit? Oh, I created the Turtles. I was here for a show. Really? Go right through. But no, other than that, people recognize the Turtles, not me. But in the early days, when we'd have fans come up, like, talking when the Turtle toys first came out, it would usually be a young person like this gentleman here and a very angry parent behind him, basically with that look like, do you know how many Christmases I spent putting together that stupid turtle blimp or that turtle sewer playset, or how much money I spent on turtle pajamas and turtle Halloween costumes and all that stuff? But now it's much different because a lot of those young men now are, young ladies and young men are, have kids of their own, and so they grew up as fans. So they're like, this is something cool I can share with my kids, and it's fantastic. So it's changed quite a bit.
But my son is in the audience, and he's laughing because I was that dad.
Yeah.
Putting together the Turtle Sewer headquarters playset. Getting mad at him.
Step at the Turtle toys in the middle of the night, go into the restroom, and it's like, oh, Leonardo.
The Turtles had another turtle, but then the mutant turned it to another turtle named Slash.
So is your question, was there a fifth turtle that died? No?
Oh, there was we did another turtle called Slash. That was he was in the comic book series. There was a fifth turtle called Slash. There was a mutant that was angry at the Turtles and wanted to hurt the Turtles at first, but then Michelangelo gave him pizza and they became friends. So now they're all friends. They all hang out together.
Was that the snapping turtle?
Yeah, that was a snapping turtle. Good question. Thank you, young man.
First, I'd like to say I'm just a huge fan. I've been following it for a while.
Thank you.
I've been doing my research on it, and through all the art collections and stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was a painting I believe you did that had the Ninja Turtles in their wrestling outfits from the Archie series.
Yes.
And I think it was noted that they originally were going to have those costumes instead of just bandanas. And I was wondering how that changed.
That's a great question. It was actually it was funny. Like early on, around the time that we developed the first look of the Turtles, and it was really like you couldn't tell them apart besides their red bandanas in the comic book and their weapons. And Pete and I explored in some early drawings of how they might change their costume, different kinds of wraps, different kind of stuff. But it wasn't so much specifically. Anytime we put sort of that wrestling stuff or superhero stuff, and they just looked. It didn't feel right. So it was a great idea to explore in one story, but we sort of try to keep them, true to the original shape. But it's fun to do that. I mean, I think we're getting close here.
Yeah, we only have time for one more question.
Good question. Thank you. Sorry. We're going to be. I'm doing a drawing thing today. How to draw the turtles. I can answer questions. I'm going to be at the table for about 3 hours this afternoon. So if we miss one of your questions, don't be sad. Come by the table and talk to me. Very appropriate. Thanks.
You kind of commented a little bit about this earlier when you talked about Jack Kirby. Mm-hmm. But can you speak a little bit about the difference between co-creating and just creating something on yourself? Because lately there's been a lot about, Stan Lee didn't really create all the characters, like there was other influences. And then now there's a big campaign for Bill Finger to be credited for Batman for helping design that.
Sure.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's a great question, and it's a really tough question because, look, when I don't want to take anything away from Stan Lee because he really he was a real pioneer, and he designed and developed the I think modern day comics, the Silver Age comics, and the way they should be written, and written for young adults is not so much for kids. But it was like, in those days, most of the comic artists did work for hire, and that was the nature of the business. It started in the 40s, and you worked for a studio, everything you produced, not only did they keep all rights of anything you created, any ideas you had, but they kept all your original artwork as well. You had so Jack Kirby would, say, sit in an office with Stan Lee, and they would kind of brainstorming, kind of like how Peter and I did it. It's like, Pete says something, I say something else, and there's a combination of those going back and forth that, develops a character. Then, half the time Jack would run off and do all the design work, and a lot of times they used to call it the Marvel style. It's like Jack would, come up with a plot, say, Stan, what do you think if they go here and do that? And they say, yes, sounds fine. And then Kirby would then pencil all the stuff, and a lot of guys did, and they'd have dialogue notes and the panel borders. Then Stan would approve it, write a final script for it, and, he owned all the rights. Marvel Comics owned all the rights. So a lot of times it's not just one person. In some cases it is. In other cases it's multiple people that come up with the idea. And I think, it would be easier if it wasn't more of a corporate thing. If there were 2 or 3 people that came up with, say, Spider-Man, like Steve Ditko had a big part of that as well, development of the character. But the corporation doesn't want to give anybody credit because it might affect their trademark or their ownership rights and stuff, and they have to protect that. So they'd rather shut them out, and these artists wouldn't get any kind of residuals, any kind of credit, wouldn't get any kind of get to share in the success of the characters, which is kind of sad. But it's an ongoing question. When Peter and I did the Donatello one-shot, it was to benefit a fund to raise money to help Jack Kirby get his artwork back. He created, I think, 8,500 pages of artwork for Marvel Comics alone. He did another 6,000 for DC, and Marvel wouldn't give him any of his artwork back unless he signed off again on any claim that he might have to Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, pretty much every Marvel character ever created by himself or with Stan Lee, and Jack refused. It's just, he wasn't making any money from the success of the characters that he created. That, they had Marvel Comics used to be at 666 Madison Avenue, a huge corporate building that were making millions and millions and millions off these characters that Jack was part of, and Jack never received a penny of that. So it's a tough question that I think the fight continues now, and it's going to continue for a while. But it's when Peter and I drew the first Turtle, yes. But without sitting in the same room with Peter Laird, the Turtles would not be the Turtles. So, we shared the credit 50-50 throughout the whole process because that was just proper. And that's what you do is good friends and co-creators. So, hey, listen, thank you very much. We'll wrap up, but thank you so much for coming and listening to me babble. And we'll be running around here today.
Kevin Eastman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for being here.
Hey listeners, this is Micus, creator of the kind of epic theme song Zombie Kids. If you're interested in finding out more about my music, you can check me out at micusmusic.com. Also, I am on iTunes, Facebook, and SoundCloud. You can look me up as Micus Music, and that's Mikus, and you know the rest. Alright, peace out everyone, keep listening.